History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to History Goes Bump Redux. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this Redux, we're going back to a Japanese location, Aokigahara Forest. This is at the base of Mount Fuji, which we just got done talking about with our Mystic Mountains episode.
We sure did.
Are you ready to go back?
I'm ready. At the base of Mount Fuji in Japan lies a forest that is 14 square miles in size and is referred to by some as a sea of trees. The forest's official name is Aokigahara Forest and has a reputation for being very quiet. That should make this area very peaceful, but it is actually pretty notorious. The forest has a reputation as a place people go to die by their own hand. Most people call this wooded area the suicide forest. There are rumors that demons run the place, and the tales of hauntings are numerous.
Mount Fuji is the highest mountain in Japan and is a dormant volcano with a legendary reputation, as we shared in our Mystic Mountains episode number 500. The Japanese have believed for centuries that this is the place where their deceased ancestors gather. Perhaps because a Shinto deity makes this his home. The volcano has not erupted since the 1700s, but through its previous eruptions, it formed a bed of volcanic rock that the Aokigahara Forest sprang from. This makes the floor of the forest so hard that it is difficult to use a shovel or pick to dig. The trees are thick and twisted, and very little animal life lives in the forest. They say that no birds are ever heard singing here, but I watched a couple of videos and I could hear birds in the background. So there are animals here, there are birds here. But the tree roots do snake across the surface of the forest floor like fingers reaching out to curl around visitors in a bid to ensnare them and never allow them to leave. It's because those roots cannot get down into that volcanic rock. So the fact that it has all the trees here that it does, enough that it's called the Sea of Trees, is amazing because they're just on the surface.
Yeah, certainly.
The forest is treacherous to walk through at times, with areas being cloaked in almost total darkness and caves dot the landscape, hidden so well in the topography that people could easily fall into them, and probably have. The terrain is rocky and uneven. Hikers often get lost here. Some carry tape with them to mark their way, as though in a modern-day fairy tale about Hansel and Gretel. The place is just creepy and feels dangerous.
Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It is never the right solution. Nearly 1 million people make that choice every year. Some people choose to go quietly, while others choose a more grandiose exit. There are places on Earth that have earned reputations as great places to die. These places include the Eiffel Tower, the Nanjing Yangtze River Bridge, Niagara Falls, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Aokigahara Forest usually ranks 1 or 2 on a list of places to die, with nearly 108 suicides every year. Most forest trails have signs indicating the distance to different spots along the route, but at Aokigahara, suicides are so prevalent in the forest that signs have been erected all over inside of it, encouraging people to live and seek help. It is believed people like to come here to end it all because they have a better chance of being successful without being noticed. Annual body searches have been carried out since the 70s. The Japanese have a certain practice they follow when a body is found in the forest. The body is brought to a special room in a building near the forest. Someone remains in the room as a type of sentinel, not even leaving at night. As one might imagine, the job of staying overnight with the dead body is not one that most people want. The guards actually play rock, paper, scissors to see who will get stuck with the duty. It is important to have a guard, or else the ghost of the dead person might haunt the building, screaming and acting deranged.
Why has suicide become so popular here? Some blame a 1960s novel by Seicho Matsumoto, named in English Black Sea of Trees, with a plot featuring young lovers who commit suicide in the Aokigahara Forest. The lore of the forest goes back much further than the 60s and is steeped in Japanese culture. The Japanese used to follow a tradition called ubasati, which loosely translated in English means abandoning an old woman. During times of famine and sometimes at other times, the elderly and infirm were taken high up on mountains or into forests, and they were left to die of exposure and dehydration. It's a hell of a way to treat grandma.
Yeah, no kidding.
It is believed that Aokigahara was one such location ubaset was practiced. A Buddhist poem tells one such story. In the depths of the mountains, who was it for the aged mother snapped one twig after another? Heedless of herself, she did so for the sake of her son. Suicide holds a unique place in Japanese culture as well. Japan's suicide rate is the 8th highest in the world. In more modern times, the high suicide rate was blamed on economic hardship and work demands. Suicide from overwork even has its own term here, kuro jisatsu. In 2009, the rate peaked and then began to taper off until the COVID-19 pandemic. What makes the increase in rates more startling now is that the uptick has been with women. And during the pandemic, self-harm in children reached an all-time high.
Suicide has long been considered a noble act in Japanese culture. Kamikaze pilots helped lead the Japanese to many victories. These pilots did not fear death, so they would take on very risky missions, and after dropping their bombs, they would turn their planes into missiles by flying them directly into targets on purpose, killing the pilot. The samurai practiced honorable suicide, which is seppuku in Japanese. If the samurai was unsuccessful in battle or meeting a certain death, he would use a knife called a tanto that had a short blade and slash open his abdomen with a side-to-side motion. The act was thought to release the samurai's warrior spirit onto the enemy and prevent any kind of dishonorable execution or torture. The samurai would also practice seppuku if he brought dishonor upon himself or did something offensive to the group. If seppuku took place outside of the battle, there was an elaborate ritual connected, which usually included a second who would cut off the head of the samurai. The samurai's wife would also kill herself by slashing her own throat. Women were taught how to do this as children. It was not only considered honorable, but was also done to prevent rape. She would tie her knees together so that she died in a dignified pose.
I mean, I could understand if you thought since your husband has died that you're not going to have protection and something horrible could happen to you, but that it's expected if the samurai is dead, now you need to off yourself too? Wow. Minamoto no Yorimasa is the first person to have practiced seppuku in recorded history. He was a poet, but also a warrior. The Minamoto part of his name represents the clan he belonged to, and he led the Minamoto army in many battles. It was during the Battle of Uji in the Genpei War in 1180 that Yorimasa took his own life. The temple he was defending was taken by a rival clan during the battle. He was shamed by the defeat. Seppuku was used for capital punishment as well and was not abolished until 1873. The last notable case of seppuku happened in 1970. Author Yukio Mishima tried to form a coup d'etat but was unsuccessful. He went to the office of General Kinetoshi Mashida and sliced open his abdomen there, while his second, Masakatsu Morita, tried to cut off his head 3 times.
Oh my
Yikes.
word.
Another man finally finished the deed and then helped Morita with his own seppuku. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
In 2018, social influencer and YouTube star Logan Paul made a video inside the forest and drew the kind of attention to himself that most people wouldn't want when the video featured what appears to be a body hanging from a tree. He issued an apology after receiving an intense backlash for publishing the video. It's this kind of disrespect that can lead to hauntings. When it comes to hauntings at Aokigahara Forest, Japanese spiritualists and paranormal investigators believe that the spirits of those who have committed suicide or have been left to die in the forest are absorbed by the trees, leading to paranormal activity. Skeptics might be quick to point out that the volcanic floor of the forest contains magnetic iron, which can cause compasses to go haywire and could give people a weird feeling. But the military has proven that GPS and compasses work just fine while in the forest. Is it possible that such a hotbed for death could be cursed? Could the darkness that permeates suicide and abandonment possibly call out to dark forces? Surely evil feeds on the fear and sorrow infused into suicide.
The Japanese have lore about ghosts they call yurei. These yurei are angry or sad spirits. These spirits reportedly come from those who've been murdered or commit suicide and thus have not had either proper burials or good deaths. Emotions like hatred and loneliness or an overwhelming desire for revenge cause souls to be trapped on this plane and unable to leave. Japanese legends claim these souls are left to wander. White forms have been seen gliding between the trees, some possibly beckoning to those who've chosen this place to die. Yurei are heard howling in the forest. People claim that faces can be seen in the bark of the trees. EVPs have been captured as well as ghost pictures along with strange lights. Objects that are set down reportedly move on their own. Hikers claim that the trees feel as if they are pressing in on them and that they move as well. It'd be easy for them to move. They're not really rooted down. They could walk all over the place.
Tree ants. Exploring with Josh on YouTube conducted an investigation in the forest that he posted in June of 2023. Through his initial walkthrough, Josh was hearing the distant voice of a female, but he couldn't make out what was being said.
And I should point out, when he went in there, it was him and I think 3 other guys. So it was all guys. They didn't have any women with them. And when they first got there, there was one car in the parking lot that they said belonged to a guy who was working at a store that was across the way. So they were literally the only people here in the forest. And they went back past a line that said, "Do not enter." So they were in a part of the forest that they weren't supposed to be in. The possibility of somebody else being there kind of wandering around too is probably pretty nil.
His main goal was to figure out why people are called to this place to end their lives. When they asked why a spirit was there, they got, "I was wealthy," over the Spirit Talker app, which works like an Ovilus.
I'd never heard of this app before, so I paused the video so that when they brought the screen up, I could see what they were using because it sounded like it worked really well. It kind of reminded me of GhostTube, the way it sounded. It had the same kind of female voice to it.
Gotcha. Shortly after that, a cat ball went off. Then they got, "I was religious," followed by Josh's group asking, "What made you come to the forest?" And it answered, "It's us." They started wondering to themselves if this was a couple that came together and then got strangled.
Because strangled came up a couple times.
About 2 minutes later, it said, "You should dig here." Oh my.
And again, you really can't dig there because it's volcanic rock.
And then the REM pod started going off as well as the cat ball. And then there was this really chilling, "I'm watching you."
It's like, from where? Behind that tree?
And then, "Leave this place." Josh's crew felt that they were getting some kind of warning because one of their members started exploring a crevice they had found. Later, they got the name Holly, and when they asked if they were talking to a Holly, the music box went off. Josh could feel a marked cold spot near the box, and a proximity alarm in front of the music box about 10 feet from it was going off.
So it really did seem like something was breaking that plane right there, because they were all trying to test it to see if it was one of them, and it kept going off. And from our experience with the music box, it plays for as long as there's something in front of it. So it will cut off mid-song if whatever it is steps away. So it might just go tink, 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 tink. Or it might go tink, 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 tink.
How's that? But yes.
So I really got a feeling that there had to be something that was crossing over in front of that they couldn't see.
The app said, "There are good spirits here," but didn't answer when they asked if there were bad spirits.
If you've got something that wants to deceive you, it's like, are they just saying they're good?
Could be. They did an EVP session and got help. And when they asked for how many were there with them, it said 7. Clearly, the place was very active for them. They even claimed to catch a demon on camera, but we don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know if they were using that as clickbait in the title of the video, because that is immediately what caught my attention.
Probably.
This is the first time I've ever watched one of their videos, but they have a ton of followers. They're like Sam and Colby. They seemed pretty respectful about what they were doing, other than the fact that they wandered back to an area that they weren't supposed to go to. And I'm pretty sure the reason why this is blocked off is because they don't want people to go off trail and hurt themselves. And they were looking into this crevice area because they got the feeling that something was in a cave there. And they were wanting to put some kind of a device down into it, but they never did get around to that from what I saw. But it seemed like whenever they were near that opening and kind of looking down into it, this app would start talking more, like trying to distract them from going over wherever that was.
Interesting.
Suicide isn't considered a mortal sin in Japanese culture as it is in Christian belief, but there still seems to be something about it that has left this forest cursed. Do the trees live in Aokigahara? Do they soak in the spirit and energy of those who have died and the negativity around them? Is this forest the home of demons? Is this forest haunted? That is for you to decide. Of course, we just want to throw in here, we got into talking a lot about suicide and suicide ideation. If you are feeling that way, the crisis line for here in the US is 988. And if you are in the UK, you can text SHOUT to 85258 or call 116-123. Looks like a really cool place, especially to go for photography and stuff. I don't know. It looks creepy to me, but we like creepy.
We do.
So it's like creepy and cool looking.
Yeah, very unique.
Yes, and it's just very sad that it has such a reputation. But, you know, I guess it'd be kind of like people feeling very peaceful at a cemetery and that being a place that they would want to go commit suicide just because it's so peaceful. And really, if you do it in this forest, it is so thick and dense that if you don't want somebody to find you and stop you before you accomplish it, you'd probably be pretty successful. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this Redux with us. I have been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.